Well, good morning, friends, colleagues and new friends, people that I have met this morning, and welcome to the National Library of Australia. I'm Dr. Marie-Louise Ayres, and I'm privileged to be the Director General of the National Library, and it gives me so much pleasure to welcome you here this morning and to have met so many of you. I begin by acknowledging the Ngambri and Ngunnawal peoples, the traditional custodians of this land. I thank their elders, past, present and emerging, for caring for this land on which we are now privileged to do our national work for the Australian people. I'm also so delighted to be here today to accept, on behalf of the National Library, these exceptional handmade archival books commemorating 6,500 of Australia's Second World War veterans. The Reflections honouring our World War II Veterans project of the Australian Institute of Professional Photography ran from 2015 to 2017 and aimed to photograph as many of the living veterans of the Second World War as possible. To create this significant archive, 450 photographers, and we have many of those photographers with us today, volunteered their time to make sensitive portraits of our servicemen and women, recognising their contributions and sacrifices. And as somebody who works in the cultural space, this seems to me to be such a beautiful and generous gift. In August 2017, the AIPP presented the Australian War Memorial with a digital archive of the project. Every portrait was made available as part of the Memorial's online collection, and I hope will one day also become discoverable via our service, Trove, and displayed, of course, in the Second World War galleries. In addition, these wonderful books were created, and it is these that I'm so honoured to accept today on behalf of the Australian people. Books such as these form a permanent part of our collection. Last year, I accepted two similar books in a very different context. They were books of messages written by people who had testified before the Royal Commission into Institutional Response to Child Sexual Abuse. On that day, I made those people the promise that this book would be a permanent part of our collection and that we will care for it forever, and I make that same promise to you today. Books like this are such a special form of collection item, allowing previously untold stories to be told or faces to be seen. Our nation has so many stories, so many identities, so many viewpoints, many ways of being an Australian, many things to remember, and indeed many things to call back into memory after being forgotten or even hidden from our view. Over the last 5 years, Australians have commemorated the events of 100 years ago, reflecting on the sacrifices made by so many individuals, families and communities during the First World War. But as we approach 80 years since the beginning of the Second World War, we have an opportunity to reflect further on those who served in that conflict and about the ways in which that conflict altered the course of Australian history. It's now my pleasure to introduce Louise Bagger, National Board Member of AIPP and the project leader. Louise was the National Coordinator for the Reflections project and photographed just over 200 veterans. Her military service of 15 years with the Royal Australian Navy has in part fuelled her interest in the project from a photographic as well as a military perspective. So, would you like to come up?
Thank you. Dr. Brendan Nelson, Director of the Australian War Memorial and Patron of the Reflections Project. Dr. Marie-Louise Ayres, Director General of the National Library of Australia. Our special guest, World War II veterans, distinguished guests, Reflections sponsors, AIPP members, ladies and gentlemen. This day has been a long time coming for a lot of people, and is one that I cannot truly express enough in words the pride it gives me to be standing before you as a representative of the Australian Institute of Professional Photography, the AIPP. On the 25th of April 2015, the AIPP embarked on the Reflections project, honouring our World War II veterans. Our mission was to capture a set studio portrait of as many surviving World War II veterans that we could find still living in Australia, and to gift the entire collection to the people of Australia, both as a digital archive and also as a portrait book. AIPP members throughout Australia donated their time and skill, their heart and soul to complete this project. Through 2015 and 2016, over 400 AIPP members created just over 6,500 portraits. Included in this collection are the men and women of our World War II Australian, New Zealand and Allied forces. To the Reflections project management team and to all of the participating photographers, some of you I'm thrilled to see here today. And together with the support of the entire membership community of the AIPP, your dedication and commitment to this project has displayed a work ethic which mirrors a culture imbued in me as a 15-year member of the Royal Australian Navy, one of loyalty and pride. It wasn't always easy or straightforward, but you were never going to let the ship sink. For this, the Institute will be forever grateful. On the 17th of August 2017, the entire digital collection was officially presented to the Australian War Memorial, which remains today as a permanent looping slideshow as part of their World War II galleries. For this, Dr. Nelson, we thank you. Today we reach the grand finale of this monumentous project with the presentation of two breathtakingly stunning portrait books. As photographers, this truly is what it's all about, the printed archival photograph. The Reflections project was all about creating a sensitive portrayal of our World War II veterans in their elderly years and provide a cognizant comparison to wartime images of young, active men and women who were photographed in their youth. These photographs, taken some 75 years ago, still exist today because someone went to the trouble to create a tangible print. Back then, of course, there was no other way to create a photograph. Fast forward to the technology of today, creating a real print has become an option rather than a necessity, and all too often, memories captured become lost or even forgotten. The books being presented today represent first and foremost to recognise the significant contribution given by those who fought for the cause during World War II. But what these books also represent is the importance that we never forget not only the role that photography plays in recording our heritage, but also that the longevity of the photographic print must never be underestimated. These books will stand the test of time to be enjoyed by our future generations, and indeed without the need for any IT department. I cannot progress further without expressing our extreme gratitude to the sponsors and creators of these books. To Paul Atkins and Atkins ProLab in Adelaide, who coordinated the graphic design and layout of the book. Many painstaking hours to ensure all elements are correctly aligned, right down to triple checking the correct alphabetical order of each veteran portrayed. To Star Leeton, who generously donated the fine art medium photo rag paper you see in the book. To Libby Jeffrey and Jeff Hunt, of Momento Pro in Sydney. Both of them are here with us today for the final production and printing and binding of these leather-bound, world-class pieces of art. In addition, a special mention to two other AIPP sponsors, Chromolux and Epson, for printing the beautiful portraits you see around the room today. Each of these sponsors have been long-time supporters of the AIPP, and we simply cannot thank you enough. Our gratitude goes without saying to the support of the Australian War Memorial and the National Library of Australia, both now custodians of the digital and physical legacies of the Reflections project. Thank you for working with us to make this a reality. Last, but by no means least, to each and every World War II veteran photographed for the project, and to those of you joining us here today. In the true spirit of the sailor in me, I personally salute you and thank you for your service and the sacrifices you made for yourselves, your families, and for your country. You are the ones who are left, and you have grown old. Age may well have wearied you, but never to be condemned. At the going down of the sun, and every morning hereafter, we will remember you. Thank you.
Louise just mentioned not needing a large IT department, and I'd have to say we have a really large one. We love physical, the physical artefact, so our hearts are singing when you were talking about the importance of the physical record, particularly of photographs. I'm now going to ask Libby Jeffrey, co-founder and marketing manager of Momento Pro, to say a few words.
Thank you very much. I'd like to start by acknowledging the Honourable Dr. Brendan Nelson, Director of the Australian War Memorial, Dr. Marie-Louise Ayres, Director General of the National Library of Australia, and the 14 World War II veterans who are with us today. I'm truly honoured to be in your presence. And to the traditional custodians of the land we are meeting on, the Ngunnawal people. On behalf of my business partners, Jeff Hunt and James Whitwell, who are both here, Momento Pro has been incredibly proud to be involved with the Reflections project. Not only has it allowed us to express our respect for every veteran appearing on the pages of these books, but it also allows us to show the power of the two art forms that are at the heart of our business, photography and print. We share the same philosophy as you. When these two practices come together, they have the power to celebrate and preserve the memory of individuals who have contributed so much to our country, far beyond their lifetime. These books will exist as physical proof of their service and sacrifice for centuries to come, ensuring they cannot be forgotten. This is the reason we approached the AIPP to be a part of the project. We wanted to ensure that the legacy of the Reflections project could survive beyond digital files and become a tangible object that descendants of the veterans can also include in a Canberra War history pilgrimage. That's also why we chose the materials that make up the Reflections volumes. The ink, the paper and the leather all have the greatest lifespan for printed products available today. And they will ensure the longevity of the book's existence. The inks are 10-colour Epson Ultrachrome inks that are rated as museum grade. The pages aren't actually paper, they are 100% cotton rag that is acid-free and makes them resistant to discoloration and deterioration, and they have been finally coated with an archival spray that will further protect the images and extend their life. The printing process was incredibly manual, taking Jeff and our fine art printer Parvez nearly 5 days of continuous printing to complete. And every page of the 550 pages were carefully checked, then folded into sections before being bound into 2 volumes, as the final number of images was far too great to fit into a single volume that could support the spine. Both editions were hand-bound in genuine leather and foil stamped by our master binder, Martin Penny. Marty is salt of the earth and not one for emotion, but he made a point of telling us about the intense pride he felt as he was producing these books. By the time they were complete, 7 members of our team were involved, 4 weeks had passed, and I can confirm that every page was handled with the reverence it deserved. And finally, to reiterate Louise's extra thanks, I'd like to mention a few people who contributed to the creation of the book. especially all the AIPP photographers who gave up their time to photograph the veterans, to Starleton, who generously donated the cotton rag for the pages, to Kasha Dentonis at the AIPP for the layout and design, and for Paul Atkins at Atkins Lab in Adelaide for the preparation of the file. We are truly honoured to have created and to now donate the Reflections book to the nation via the National Library of Australia. And we hope that the veterans, their families and the public's interaction with these books helps to celebrate the heroes of World War II, whose memories will live on through the pages of these books. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Libby, and particularly for emphasising that these books will last hundreds of years, and this is what we aim to do in our memory institutions, to build memories, to share them, and to share that generosity of spirit that I think we feel in the room here today. And in that vein, of course, my colleague, the Honourable Dr. Brendan Nelson, Director of the Australian War Memorial, like myself, is in the memory game, and I would like to ask him to come and share his thoughts about Reflections honouring the World War II veterans. So, Brendan, thanks for coming up.
Thank you very much, Marie-Louise, Dr. Ayres. John Swainston, President of the Australian Institute of Professional Photographers, Ross Eason, past President, John Leroy, the Project Manager for Reflections, and Louise Bagger, of course. To the team of Momento Pro, thank you, Libby, for not only the gift that your company has given us and this remarkable generation, but also for your remarks and the way in which they were given. To the 14 veterans that are here, and the families who love and support you, your descendants, ladies and gentlemen. Australians, all let us rejoice, for we are young and free. First line of our national anthem. We sing it often, we hear it sung often, but for my and my children's generation in particular, far too often do we take it for granted. Less often do we reflect on what it really means. And we are free. We are free in no small way because of you and the generation from which you come. I know the professional photographers call it the Reflections Project. I call it the Faces of Freedom. The 6,500 images of men and women that we proudly now display through the end of the Second World War galleries of the Australian War Memorial. Images taken with professionalism, love and enormous commitment by Australia's professional photographers, who, whilst doing it for no financial gain whatsoever, indeed at their own cost, gained much, much more themselves in the process of doing so. You are and represent the members of the best generation this country has ever produced. Within it, of course, was the good and the bad and the great and the small. But you were born in the aftermath of the war that was. You grew up through the Great Depression. You came to your young adult lives under the shadows of a war that you knew was coming. And then the Second World War, no mere extension of the First. It wasn't about Australia's emerging identity or place in the world. Our vital interests were at stake. We were 7 million people. 1 million of you, men and women, mobilised. We sent 500,000 of you overseas. You fought in the deserts of North Africa, the Russian convoys, the North Atlantic, the skies over Europe, the Southwest Pacific, Borneo, New Guinea, and of course in Australia itself. 78,000 women alone mobilised, doing much more than the important task of nursing. You gave your youth 40,000 of your friends and fellow countrymen gave their lives, 150,000 their physical health, an indeterminate number their psychological health. And then you set about the economic and social reconstruction of this country. You gave my generation a standard of living and a framework of values which all of us have a responsibility to pass to the next and subsequent generations. Yours is a generation that enshrined principle above position. Values were more important than value. Your responsibilities to one another, our nation and its future, transcended and defined your rights. In the process of taking the photos, and then for us displaying them when we accepted them on the 72nd anniversary of the end of the Second World War in the Pacific, I wanted to make sure that we had some of the words of the photographers and also of the subjects displayed alongside the images themselves. And I'd just like to repeat a couple of those to you, and they're instructive. One of the photographers, Robert Hearty, said this: "Before I leave each of these veterans, I always take the time to pause, to put down my camera, hold out my hand, look deep into their eyes and say thank you." Tears started to fall from Alexander's eyes, he says. He said, "The Reflections project has made me appreciate the sacrifices these men and women made and how they all put their hands up to take a stance for their beloved home and country." Kelly Snow was 95 when her photo was taken. And Kelly said that she doesn't like the song Auld Lang Syne, as it always reminds her of the New Year's Eve during her service, when the group of young guys and girls all dancing in a row doing the can-can and having a wonderful time. And then the next day the boys went on a raid over Germany, and not one of them came back. And then, as we mark the Torres Strait Regiment this week, its anniversary, so there's a photograph taken by Peter Rossi, and it's a photograph of a 95-year-old Bamir from the Torres Strait, who enlisted with the Torres Strait Light Infantry Battalion in 1942, and is one of only 3 surviving members of the battalion. Bamir's son, Eddie, says, "He joined the army in 1942. When this happened, he saw it as a call of duty. He was honoured to be a part of it and do the service. Before he joined the army, they lived in the dark by kerosene lamp. When he joined the war, he saw the light. He saw electricity. War introduced them to modern society. He's my father, and I'm honoured he's my dad, and has given me this world. He stood up and believed what he did was right. I just want to cry." And so to every one of them is a reflection of that and those sentiments. And you see in the images, for many of these men and women, it was perhaps the first time in a decade or two they'd gone and put on a jacket. Most in fact proudly wearing an RSL badge, some not wearing any of their medals, some wearing a lot. The photographers went to retirement villages, they went to nursing homes. In some cases, veterans would only be photographed with 2 of their mates and had a lot of fun doing it. In one case, one man who survived the campaign in Africa and then in New Guinea is photographed holding his late brother's slouch hat, having been killed during the campaign. This is a remarkable gift that has been given to our nation, to the Australian War Memorial, to the National Library of Australia. I thank all of you that have been involved with it, and I also reflect many of the other things that we can learn, and me personally in particular, when you meet people like Laurie and Sheila Hancock, who will celebrate, and I think that is the word celebrate, their 72nd wedding anniversary on the 5th of April next year, you realise there's a lot to learn from your generation, and you don't need me to tell you that your generation is leaving and leaving very quickly. Many of those who've been now photographed over this 2-year period will have already passed, but your spirit will linger forever and be remembered, certainly at the Australian War Memorial, be remembered here and throughout the country. It's been my privilege to play a small role in helping you. On a light-hearted note, one of my friends from my former political life is Warren Inch, the member for Leichhardt. Interesting man, left school at the age of 13 to clean toilets at the Mareeba train station, became a crocodile farmer, a campaigner, a strongly heterosexual man, campaigned tirelessly for same-sex marriage. He rang me up in 2014 and he said, mate, I need you to do something. He said, these poor bastards, these photographers, he said, they're trying to take photos of these old vets before they leave. He said, no one wants to give them any help or anything, they're up against it, can you do something, can you see the guys running it? I said, oh, okay. So I did, I met Ross and a couple of them, and I proudly accepted the invitation to become a patron, and I said to them at the time, when they're done, we would love to have them here at the War Memorial and display them. And then my head of exhibitions, I had to say, Suzanne, I've had another idea. She puts her hands over. No. But it is our privilege to have been a part of it, and thank you for the many, many gifts that you have given us. And I congratulate, as I say, Momento Pro and everybody involved in this gift to the National Library. Thank you.